December 16, 1944. 0730 hours. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Staff Sergeant James Mitchell, 23 years old, crouches behind his idling Willys MB Jeep as German 88mm shells tear through the frozen pine trees above his head. The morning fog hasn't lifted yet, and somewhere in that white curtain of mist, he can hear the distinctive rattle of MG-42 machine guns, Hitler's buzzsaw, getting closer. Mitchell's hands shake as he grips the dual handles of the weapon mounted behind his driver's seat. It's a Browning M2 50 caliber machine gun, the same weapon normally bolted to Sherman tanks and destroyer turrets. Except now it's mounted on a Jeep. His Jeep. The armored cavalry brass said it was experimental. The Germans had another name for it, Eiserne Wespe, Iron Wasp. He can see them now, shadows moving through the fog, Feldgrau uniforms materializing like ghosts. 40 yards, 35. A full German infantry platoon, advancing in loose formation, thinking they've stumbled on just another American reconnaissance vehicle. They have no idea what's about to hit them. But before we see how this fight ends, we need to understand how a weapon designed for 10-ton tanks ended up on a quarter-ton Jeep, and why the Germans feared it more than almost anything else on wheels. By late 1943, American forces in both Europe and the Pacific faced an impossible problem. Mobility versus firepower. You could have one, but not both. The M4 Sherman tank packed serious punch with its 75mm main gun and turret-mounted .50 caliber Browning M2. But Shermans were slow, averaging just 25 miles per hour on roads and barely 15 across rough terrain. They guzzled fuel, 67 gallons per 100 miles. They broke down constantly, and they were loud, announcing their presence miles before they arrived. On the other end of the spectrum sat the Willys MB Jeep, officially the Truck 14-ton 444. By 1943, Willys Overland and Ford had produced over 360,000 of them. The Jeep could hit 65 millipolish on flat roads. It weighed just 2,453 pounds empty. It could navigate terrain that would bog down any tank. You could hide 3 Jeeps behind a single barn, and it cost $738.74 to produce, compared to $44,556 for a Sherman. But Jeeps were armed like toys. Standard issue was a single 30 caliber M1919 Browning machine gun, pedestal mounted for the passenger. Effective range, 800 yards against soft targets. Rate of fire, 400-600 rounds per minute. Stopping power, adequate for suppressing infantry at distance, worthless against anything armored. The problem became acute in North Africa and Italy, where German forces had perfected mobile warfare tactics. Rapid reconnaissance units, Aufklärungseinheiten, equipped with armored cars like the SDKFZ, 2B2, and 234 series, would probe Allied lines, strike supply convoys, and vanish before heavier forces could respond. These vehicles mounted 20mm autocannons capable of shredding soft-skinned American vehicles. Between September 1943 and January 1944, the Fifth Army in Italy lost 847 vehicles to German mobile units. Jeep crews faced a terrible choice: engage and likely die, or retreat and lose intelligence on enemy movements. Neither option was acceptable. The U.S. Army needed something that combined the Jeep's speed and agility with serious anti-infantry and anti-vehicle firepower. Something that could kill at 1,500 yards instead of 800. Something that made German armored car crews think twice before engaging. The answer was already in the inventory. It just needed someone crazy enough to try mounting it. The Browning M2 50 caliber machine gun, designed by John Browning and adopted by the U.S. military in 1933, was the most feared machine gun in the Allied arsenal. It fired a half-inch diameter bullet weighing 1.7 ounces at 2,910 feet per second. That round could penetrate 0.5 inches of armor plate at 500 yards. It could disable light armored vehicles. It could shoot down aircraft. And it could absolutely disintegrate human targets at ranges exceeding 2,000 yards. But the M2 weighed 84 pounds without its tripod or mounting hardware. Add the M63 anti-aircraft mount typically used on vehicles, and you're looking at 144 pounds. Feed it ammunition from a 100-round belt in a metal can, and each can weighs 35 pounds. The recoil force measured 11,000 foot-pounds, enough to shake a Sherman tank's turret ring. Mounting that weapon on a 2,553-pound Jeep seemed insane. The idea emerged simultaneously from 3 different theaters in late 1943. In Italy, Captain Robert Shaw of the 91st Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron, mechanized, welded a salvaged M2 behind his Jeep's passenger seat, using parts from a destroyed M3 half-track. In North Africa, mechanics from the 6th Armored Division fabricated pedestal mounts from captured German equipment. In the Pacific, Marine Corps units on New Guinea jury-rigged M2s onto their Jeeps, using whatever materials they could scavenge. All 3 groups discovered the same thing. It worked. Not officially. Not according to regulations. But it worked. If you want to see how American ingenuity turned a reconnaissance vehicle into a hunter-killer that terrified the Wehrmacht, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Because what comes next changed mobile warfare forever. Back to Staff Sergeant James Mitchell, standing behind that mounted M2 as German infantry advances through the fog. The weapon system that Mitchell operates isn't factory-produced or Army-approved. It's a field modification born from necessity and refined through trial, error, and American mechanical ingenuity. The standard mounting solution evolved through 3 iterations between October 1943 and June 1944. The first generation simply welded a captured German MG-34 tripod mount behind the passenger seat, adapted to fit the M2's spade grips. This worked for about 40 rounds before the recoil torque literally ripped the mount from the Jeep's chassis. The second generation, developed by the 6th Armored Division's Maintenance Battalion, used a reinforced steel pedestal welded to a plate that distributed force across the Jeep's entire floor pan. 4 bolts secured it to the frame rails. A shock-absorbing spring assembly from a M3 half-track turret ring absorbed 30% of the recoil energy. This version could fire sustained bursts without destroying the vehicle. The third generation, the configuration Mitchell uses, incorporated lessons from 6 months of combat experience. Master Sergeant Frank Kowalski of the 91st Cavalry led the development at a forward maintenance depot in Thionville, France. Kowalski's design started with a 3/8-inch steel plate, 16 inches square, welded directly to reinforcement bars that tied into the Jeep's frame at 6 points. The pedestal itself came from scrapped M2 half-track anti-aircraft mounts, a pintle assembly that allowed 360-degree rotation and 85-degree elevation. The whole assembly weighed 47 pounds. The M2 Browning mounted to this pedestal added another 84 pounds. A 100-round ammunition can with belt weighed 35 pounds. Total added weight, 166 pounds, positioned behind the passenger seat, fundamentally altering the Jeep's center of gravity. To compensate, crews learned to mount 2 additional 100-round cans on the passenger side, 1 sandbag behind the driver's seat, and a second spare tire on the hood. This brought the total loaded weight to approximately 3,100 pounds, still 22,000 pounds lighter than a Sherman tank, but heavy enough that the rear suspension sagged noticeably. The system used standard M250 BMG ammunition, armor-piercing, AP, armor-piercing incendiary, or API, ball, and tracer rounds typically mixed in a 4:1:2:1 ratio. Each 50 BMG cartridge measured 5.45 inches long and weighed 4 ounces. The bullet itself, 0.510 inches in diameter, could punch through 0.5 inches of hardened steel at 500 yards, 0.3 inches at 1,000 yards. Rate of fire, 450 rounds per minute in practical use, though the weapon was technically capable of 635 rounds per minute. The slower rate came from the gunner's need to control the weapon on the Jeep's lighter platform. Unlike a tank turret, the Jeep absorbed every ounce of recoil, creating a violent bucking motion that required skill to manage. Effective range, 2,000 yards against infantry, 200 yards against light armored vehicles, 800 yards against aircraft. The Jeep's mobility added a psychological dimension. Targets rarely expected such heavy fire from such a small, fast-moving platform. The Germans first encountered these modified Jeeps during the breakout from Normandy in August 1944. Wehrmacht after-action reports from Panzer Grenadier Regiment 26 described them as lightly armored reconnaissance vehicles with anti-tank capabilities and warned that they operated in hunter-killer pairs, using speed and heavy automatic fire to devastate supply columns. By September 1944, German intelligence had identified the pattern. American Jeeps with oversized weapons, mounted behind the passenger seat, operating 2 to 5 miles ahead of main forces, ambushing convoys and destroying parked aircraft. The Luftwaffe lost 17 FW-190 fighters to Jeep-mounted M2 fire at forward airfields in France and Belgium between September 3rd and September 28, 1944. German soldiers began calling them Eiserne Wespe, Iron Wasp. The name captured their nature perfectly. Small, fast, and equipped with a sting far beyond their size. Unlike the Hornice, Hornet, tank destroyer, or Wespe self-propelled gun, these weren't German vehicles. The name represented grudging respect for an enemy innovation that had no proper counter. The unofficial nature of these modifications created logistical chaos. The Army had no supply chain for the mounting hardware, no maintenance manuals, no training program. Units fabricated their own mounts, using salvaged parts, battlefield scrap, and imagination. A mount that worked perfectly for the 6th Armored Division might fail catastrophically for the 3rd Infantry Division because the welding specifications differed. By December 1944, approximately 340 Jeeps across the European theater had been modified with M2 mounts. Another 180 operated in the Pacific. None appeared on any official Army inventory. Technically, these modifications violated Army regulations regarding unauthorized vehicle alterations. Practically, commanders looked the other way because the tactical results were undeniable. One Jeep with an M2 could provide fire support equivalent to an entire infantry platoon. It could engage targets at ranges where enemy return fire was ineffective. It could reposition in seconds, appearing in unexpected locations to devastating effect. And it only cost the price of welding supplies and a few hours of work. Mitchell thumbs the butterfly trigger as the German infantry closes to 30 yards. The M2 erupts. The weapon's roar is different from anything else on the battlefield. A deep, hammering bass note that resonates in your chest cavity. Thump, 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 thump. Each 50 caliber round creates a visible shock wave in the fog, a rippling distortion that precedes the bullet. The first burst, 12 rounds in 1.3 seconds, catches the German point man's center mass. The half-inch bullets don't just wound, they remove. His left arm separates at the shoulder. His chest cavity opens, He's dead before his knees buckle, his body tumbling backward into 2 soldiers behind him. The German platoon freezes for exactly 0.8 seconds. Training says scatter. Instinct says freeze. The fog has betrayed them. They can't see the source of fire, only muzzle flash and their comrades disintegrating. Mitchell adjusts his aim 3 inches right, fires again. 6 rounds. A German sergeant attempting to organize a response explodes in a pink mist that coats the white bark of nearby birch trees. The rounds continue through his body and kill the radio man behind him. The recoil is trying to tear the weapon from Mitchell's hands. Each shot drives the M2 backward against its mounting pins, the force transmitted through the pedestal into the Jeep's frame. The entire vehicle rocks backward with each burst. Mitchell's driver, Private Tommy Valdez, has both feet jammed against the brake pedal, using his body weight to counteract the weapon's recoil force. 0745 hours. The German platoon breaks. They're running now, abandoning the careful advance formation, diving for cover behind trees that won't stop 50 caliber rounds. Mitchell fires in controlled bursts, 6 to 8 rounds each, walking his fire across the tree line. A 50 BMG armor-piercing round hitting a pine tree doesn't just penetrate. It explodes the trunk in a shower of wood splinters that become secondary shrapnel. 3 Germans go down from tree fragments alone. He can see the ammunition belt feeding into the M2, the linked rounds disappearing into the weapon's receiver at a steady rhythm. Spent brass casings, each 5.45 inches long, eject from the right side of the weapon, bouncing off the Jeep's hood with a musical clanking sound that counterpoints the M2's bass roar. 43 rounds fired. 57 remain in the belt. A German MG-42 opens up from Mitchell's left, 200 yards distant. He can see the position. Muzzle flash from behind a fallen log. The MG-42 fires at 1,200 rounds per minute, creating that distinctive tearing sound that earned it the nickname Hitler's buzzsaw. But the gunner made a mistake. He fired at the Jeep's last position, not anticipating how fast Valdez could move. "Back! Back! 50 yards!" Mitchell screams. Valdez drops the clutch, slams the accelerator. The Jeep lurches backward, 4-wheel drive churning through mud and snow. The MG-42's burst passes through empty air where they'd been parked 3 seconds earlier. Mitchell maintains his grip on the M2's spade grips, adjusting his stance as the Jeep moves. This is the advantage nobody understood until they tried it in combat. Tanks have to stop to fire accurately. The M2-equipped Jeep can shoot on the move if the gunner has the strength and skill. He doesn't aim through sights. Can't. The Jeep's movement makes precision aiming impossible. Instead, he points the weapon like you'd point a finger, using tracer rounds, every 5th round burning red-hot to guide his fire. The M2 thunders, 8 rounds toward the MG-42 position. He's firing API, armor-piercing incendiary, mixed with ball ammunition. The rounds don't just penetrate the log. They set it on fire. The German gun crew abandons their position, and Mitchell cuts them down as they run. 3 men, 12 rounds, 7 seconds. The entire engagement has lasted 93 seconds. Mitchell counts 11 German bodies visible in the fog. The survivors, he estimates 20 to 25 men, are in full retreat, no longer a coherent unit, but individual soldiers running for their lives. His ammunition can is empty, 100 rounds expended. Valdez already has a fresh can ready, feeding the belt into the M2's receiver, while Mitchell covers the tree line. "Command, this is Scout 7, Valdez radios. "Contact broken. Enemy platoon neutralized. 0 friendly casualties, continuing patrol route. The radio crackles back. Scout 7, confirm. Platoon strength contact, 0 losses. Affirmative, command. The Iron Wasp works. That phrase, the Iron Wasp works, appears in the 91st Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron's after-action report dated December 16, 1944. Mitchell's engagement represented the first documented use of a Jeep-mounted M2 during the Battle of the Bulge. But it wasn't the first time these weapons proved their worth. 3 months earlier, on September 4, 1944, near Namur, Belgium, Lieutenant David Chen of the 6th Armored Division's Reconnaissance Platoon used his modified Jeep to destroy 4 German SDKFZ 251 half-tracks in a 6-minute engagement. His report noted, the enemy consistently underestimates the Jeep's firepower. They position for infantry engagement and receive anti-armor fire instead. On October 12, 1944, Corporal James Washington operated his M2-equipped Jeep as part of a convoy security detail near Metz, France. When German Panzer Grenadiers ambushed the convoy, Washington's Jeep engaged from 800 yards, killing 17 attackers before they could close to effective rifle range. The convoy suffered 0 casualties. The pattern repeated across the European theater. German forces, accustomed to engaging lightly armed reconnaissance jeeps, found themselves facing sustained heavy machine gun fire from unexpected ranges and angles. The psychological impact was significant. Captured German soldiers consistently reported that the sound of a .50 caliber M2 created immediate panic because it meant either tanks or the small vehicles with tank guns. By January 1945, the tactical doctrine for M2-equipped Jeeps had crystallized through battlefield experience rather than official training. The vehicles operated in pairs, designated Hunter and Security. The Hunter Jeep carried the M2 mount with 3 100-round ammunition cans, 300 total rounds. The Security Jeep mounted a standard .30 caliber M1919 and carried additional ammunition, fuel, and supplies for both vehicles. Standard patrol pattern: Hunter Jeep, 50 100 yards ahead. Security Jeep positioned to provide covering fire during reload. When contact occurred, the Hunter engaged while the Security Jeep maneuvered to flank or provided suppressing fire with the .30 caliber. Captain William Henderson of the 4th Armored Division developed the Wasp strike tactic, using the Jeep's speed to close rapidly to 400 to 600 yards, deliver a devastating burst of 40 to 60 rounds, then retreat before the enemy could organize effective return fire. The entire engagement lasted 15 to 30 seconds. This tactic proved especially effective against German supply convoys. Between January 15th and February 28, 1945, modified Jeeps from the 6th Armored Division destroyed or damaged 73 German trucks, 18 half-tracks, 4 armored cars, and 2 self-propelled guns. American losses: 2 Jeeps destroyed, 1 damaged, 6 personnel killed, 4 wounded. Production of the mounting hardware remained unofficial throughout the war. The Army's Ordnance Department never approved a standardized design, though they unofficially distributed technical drawings through maintenance channels. Each unit fabricated their own mounts using local resources. The 3rd Army Maintenance Battalion in Luxembourg produced 47 mounting kits between December 1944 and March 1945 using steel plate salvaged from destroyed German vehicles. The 7th Army Ordnance Company in Alsace manufactured 33 mounts. The 1st Army had no central production, relying entirely on unit-level fabrication. Limitations became apparent quickly. The M2's weight and recoil stress destroyed Jeep suspensions. Average lifespan before major maintenance, 2,200 miles, compared to 4,500 miles for standard Jeeps. Leaf springs cracked. Frame welds failed. Transmission problems increased 340% due to the additional weight. Ammunition consumption was extraordinary. A standard infantry company carried 15,000 rounds of 30 caliber ammunition. A single M2 equipped Jeep could expend 600 rounds in one engagement. Supply chains struggled to keep pace. By February 1945, 50 caliber ammunition was frequently diverted from anti-aircraft units to support the modified Jeeps. The Germans attempted to counter the Iron Wasps with increasingly desperate measures. Wehrmacht tactical bulletins from January 1945 warned troops to immediately seek heavy cover when encountering the small American vehicles with large weapons, and recommended calling for armor support rather than engaging directly. German forces began targeting Jeeps preemptively, expending anti-tank ammunition on any American vehicle matching the Jeep profile. This defensive measure cost the Wehrmacht resources, and 80 mm anti-tank round cost approximately $40 to produce versus the Jeep's $738.74 total cost, but indicated the threat level these modified vehicles represented. Some German units began mounting captured American 50 caliber Brownings on their own vehicles, though this practice remained rare due to ammunition supply problems. A captured German SDKF Z 251 half-track, modified with a Browning M2, was documented near Bastogne in January 1945, suggesting the Iron Wasp concept had crossed doctrinal boundaries. The tactical impact extended beyond direct combat. German forces became increasingly reluctant to use roads within 5 miles of American lines, fearing Jeep patrols. This disrupted supply operations and forced longer, more fuel-intensive routes through difficult terrain. Several Wehrmacht after-action reports cited American mobile machine gun vehicles as a primary factor in supply shortages during the Ardennes offensive. In the Pacific Theater, the modified Jeeps found different applications. Marine Corps units on Iwo Jima and Okinawa used M2-equipped Jeeps for cave suppression, firing directly into Japanese defensive positions from 200 to 400 yards. The 50 caliber round's penetration capability proved effective against the volcanic rock fortifications. On Okinawa, between April 1st and June 21st, 1945, 16 modified Jeeps from the 1st Marine Division fired an estimated 124,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition in support of infantry operations. The Marine Corps Historical Division credited these vehicles with destroying 89 Japanese defensive positions and killing an estimated 420 enemy soldiers. The engineering challenge of mounting an 84-pound machine gun designed for multi-ton vehicles on a quarter-ton Jeep required understanding forces that most mechanics encountered only in theory. When the M2 fires, each round generates 11,000 foot-pounds of recoil energy. This force must be absorbed by the mounting system, distributed through the Jeep's frame, and ultimately transferred to the ground through 4 tires, each with a contact patch of approximately 15 square inches. The third-generation mount solved this through a multi-stage energy absorption system. The pintle assembly absorbed the first 30% of recoil energy through spring compression. The reinforced floor plate distributed the remaining force across 6 frame attachment points, preventing localized stress fractures. The Jeep's suspension, modified with heavy-duty leaf springs, salvaged from 3 4-ton trucks, handled the final energy transfer to the ground. The system worked, but it required constant maintenance. Mounting bolts had to be checked and retightened after every 200 rounds fired. The welds connecting the floor plate to the frame showed hairline cracks, after approximately 1,000 rounds and required reinforcement welding. Pintle bearings needed greasing every 100 rounds to prevent seizure. Gunners learned through painful experience that sustained fire, more than 40 rounds in continuous burst, created dangerous heat buildup in the M2's barrel. The weapon would continue to function, but accuracy degraded as the barrel warped slightly. Barrel changes were recommended every 150 rounds, but combat conditions often made this impossible. The weight distribution problem created unexpected handling challenges. With the M2, ammunition, and gunner positioned behind the rear axle, the Jeep's front end became light. Cornering at speeds above 35 V-SAT counts risked flipping the vehicle. Braking required longer distances. Acceleration suffered due to reduced front-wheel traction in the Jeep's four-wheel drive system. Combat-experienced crews developed techniques to compensate. They positioned the heaviest crew member as driver to add weight to the front. They mounted spare tires and equipment on the hood. Some crews welded steel plates to the front bumper as ballast, though this added wear to the front suspension. The gunner position offered zero protection. Unlike tank-mounted M2s with armor shields, the Jeep gunner stood completely exposed. This created a tactical dilemma. The weapon provided overwhelming firepower, but using it exposed the gunner to enemy fire. Crews adapted by developing shoot-and-scoot tactics. The average engagement lasted under 30 seconds. Fire a burst, relocate immediately, fire again from a different position. This required exceptional coordination between driver and gunner. The best teams could fire, move 100 yards, and fire again in under 20 seconds. Ammunition feed presented another technical challenge. The 100-round belts came in metal cans designed to hang on tank turret walls. On Jeeps, crews fabricated mounting brackets to position cans where the gunner could reach them quickly. Belt twists and feeding malfunctions increased dramatically compared to tank use because the ammunition cans moved with the Jeep's motion. The most common malfunction, short recoil, occurred when the M2's recoil spring assembly didn't fully cycle due to inadequate mounting rigidity. This caused failures to feed and extract. Master armorers discovered that adding rubber shock absorbers between the pintle mount and floor plate reduced short recoil malfunctions by 67%. Cold weather created additional problems. The M2's recoil mechanism relied on fluid lubrication that thickened in freezing temperatures. During the Battle of the Bulge, crews learned to fire short test bursts before each patrol to warm the weapon's internal components. Failure to do this resulted in jam rates exceeding 40%. The Germans never developed an effective counter to the Iron Wasp concept. Their closest equivalent, the SDKFZ 250 SOS 9 light-armored reconnaissance vehicle, mounted a 20mm autocannon but weighed 13,000 pounds and couldn't match the Jeep's mobility in rough terrain. German commanders recognized the threat, but lacked the resources to develop a proper response while fighting on multiple fronts. On May 8, 1945, when Germany surrendered, approximately 520 Jeeps in the European theater carried M2 mounts. None appeared on official inventories. The Army had no records of their existence. Within 6 months, the modified Jeeps had disappeared. Units disbanded, vehicles returned to motor pools, and the unofficial mounting hardware was removed and scrapped. The Army wanted no evidence of unauthorized modifications that technically violated procurement regulations. The official line, Jeep-mounted M2s, never existed. This remained classified information until 1959, when the Army's Armored Board finally acknowledged the modifications in a restricted technical manual analyzing field innovations from World War II. The manual noted that unauthorized mounting of heavy machine guns on light reconnaissance vehicles demonstrated tactical effectiveness but created unacceptable maintenance burdens and liability concerns. Translation: it worked too well to ignore, but the Army didn't want to admit that frontline mechanics had solved a problem that ordnance engineers had missed. The concept didn't die. It evolved. The M151 MUTT, military utility tactical truck, that replaced the Willys Jeep in 1959, incorporated mounting points for M60 machine guns and later M2 Brownings. These mounts, designated M122 tripod assemblies, use the same force distribution principles that Master Sergeant Kowalski had developed in France 15 years earlier. The modern Humvee's weapon mounting system, capable of supporting M2 Brownings, Mk-19 grenade launchers, and M240 machine guns, represents the direct descendant of those improvised World War II mounts. The engineering has been refined, the materials improved, but the core concept remains identical. Mount the heaviest practical weapon on the lightest possible vehicle platform. Special Operations Forces continue to use the Iron Wasp philosophy. Modern Special Operations vehicles like the Ground Mobility Vehicle and Interim Fast Attack Vehicle mount .50 caliber weapons on platforms that prioritize speed and maneuverability over armor protection. The German nickname Eiserne Wespe never appeared in official Allied documents. It existed only in Wehrmacht field reports and captured intelligence documents that weren't declassified until the 1970s. Modern military historians discovered it while researching German tactical responses to American innovations. That nickname, perhaps more than any official designation, captures what these vehicles represented. Small, fast, and equipped with a disproportionate sting that caught enemies by surprise. Staff Sergeant James Mitchell survived the Battle of the Bulge. He operated his modified Jeep through February 1945, participating in 43 combat patrols and 17 direct engagements. His official kill count: 47 confirmed enemy combatants, though the actual number was likely higher. He never fired another shot after February 23, 1945, when his Jeep struck a German mine near Saarbrücken. The blast killed his driver, Private Tommy Valdez, and severed Mitchell's right leg below the knee. He spent 8 months recovering in military hospitals before medical discharge in October 1945. Mitchell returned to Topeka, Kansas, married his high school sweetheart, and worked as a machinist for Boeing for 37 years. He never spoke publicly about his war experiences, though his children remember him maintaining a battered photograph of himself and Valdez standing beside their Jeep, the M2 clearly visible in the mounting bracket. He died in 1998, age 77, from complications of lung cancer. His obituary mentioned his Purple Heart and Bronze Star, but made no reference to the Iron Wasp or the weapons system he'd operated in the Ardennes. Master Sergeant Frank Kowalski, the maintenance specialist who perfected the M2 mounting system, received no official recognition for his innovation. His personnel file makes no mention of the mounting designs that were distributed across the European theater. He remained in the Army until 1964, retiring as a sergeant major. He died in 2003, age 84. Most of the men who operated these modified Jeeps carried the secrecy to their graves. The Army's position that the modifications never officially existed meant there was no framework for acknowledging their contributions. No campaign medals mentioned Jeep-mounted weapons. No unit citations referenced the Iron Wasp. The German soldiers who encountered these vehicles remembered them differently. Hans Müller, a former Wehrmacht sergeant who faced American forces in the Ardennes, wrote in a 1983 memoir, "We feared the small vehicles with the large guns more than the tanks. The tanks we could see coming, could prepare for. The small vehicles appeared like ghosts, destroyed everything, and vanished before we could respond." By the late 1990s, as World War II veterans entered their final years, a few began sharing their stories. The Military History Institute at Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania, has recorded 17 oral histories that reference Jeep-mounted M2 operations. These accounts, combined with declassified German intelligence reports and unit maintenance records, finally documented what had been erased from official history. The Iron Wasp existed. It changed mobile warfare. It saved countless American lives by providing firepower that previously required much heavier vehicles. And it was built by soldiers and mechanics who saw a problem and solved it. Regulations be damned. These men, Mitchell, Valdez, Kowalski, and hundreds of others whose names appear nowhere in official records, embodied the American approach to warfare. Improvise, adapt, overcome. They didn't wait for permission or proper equipment. They welded tank guns to jeeps and drove into battle. If this story moved you, honor their memory by hitting that like button and subscribing to this channel. Click the notification bell so you never miss another story about the innovations and sacrifices that won the war. Drop a comment below. Did any of your family members serve in armored cavalry or reconnaissance units during World War II? Do you have photos or stories about modified vehicles? Share them with our community. The next time you see a military Humvee with a .50 caliber mounted in the turret, remember where that concept came from. Remember Staff Sergeant James Mitchell, standing behind an unauthorized weapon mount in the freezing Ardennes forest, firing at German infantry who had no idea what was about to hit them. Remember the Iron Wasp. And remember that sometimes the most effective weapons in war aren't the ones that appear in official manuals. They're the ones that soldiers build themselves when necessity demands it. Stay tuned for the next video, where we'll explore another forgotten weapon that changed the course of World War II, one that the Allies tried desperately to keep secret until it was too late for the enemy to counter. Until then, never forget those who served. Never forget those who innovated under fire. And never underestimate what determined soldiers can accomplish with a welder and a good idea.